podcast on the Boss Up Houston Network. Come get your questions answered. We'll see you then. And remember, lawyer up. Welcome, everybody. It's so good to see you. Happy Friday. It is Steve Okoraha. We are here on Lawyer Up with Steve-O. I am your host, Steve Okoraha, and we have a very special guest today. I am actually very excited about this show, more than I usually am, and I'll get to why in a second. But let me go into a little bit about what the show is about, only because I want to remind people exactly why I do have this show. For those that are new, for those that we usually see, thank you so much for following me. You can also find my previous shows on YouTube and on Facebook as well. And anywhere you get your favorite podcasts, you can also find the show. But the reason we do this show is we're trying to empower you, the viewer. We're trying to give you information and helpful tips, both in the legal realm and the non-legal realm, about ways to kind of avoid unnecessary pitfalls and things that can actually help you. A lot's going on, as you know, with the pandemic. So the theme of this season, which is season 2, is to give you a little bit more of context as to what's going on, especially as it relates to the pandemic. So with that, who am I? I practice law in Fort Bend and Harris County, and I practice family law. I practice business and contracts. I do traffic tickets. I do estate planning. I do a little bit of everything under the sun. So feel free to reach out to me and give me a call about any one of your legal issues that you have. My contact information will be provided at the end. So now we got that out of the way, I want to get into exactly why we're here and introduce someone that's very important. That's going to give you a lot of knowledge. Like I have my pen ready because I'm going to be writing it down a lot of different notes with you guys. So get your pens ready, get your cameras ready, because this is going to be something you're going to want to make sure you record. So the special show we have today, I'm excited because for those that don't know, I'm a father of 2 beautiful little girls who are my world, and there is going to be a lot of different things that are going to help you understand how the pandemic has affected children. To talk about that, we have someone very special here. She works in the nonprofit realm as an early childhood intervention therapist and who resides in Fort Bend County, where she previously ran for county commissioner in Precinct 1. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Dr. Jennifer Cantu. Great to have you, Dr. Cantu.
I'm glad to be here. Let's get ready.
Yes.
Start the education.
Oh, yes. No, I'm ready. I'm ready for the education. I have personally a lot of questions, so I'm going to try not to. I'm going to make them more general, but I will definitely ask you those questions.
Gear them towards.
Yes.
And I do mainly work with infants and toddlers, so it's perfect. I mainly work with children under the age of 3.
Perfect. So you're going to get a lot of young parents that are very inquisitive as to how to properly raise their children. So, all right, like I said, we have a lot of information for you, but we're going to take a very short break. When we come back, we're going to get right into it, so stay tuned.
Wanna be a boss? You're watching Boss Up Houston Network. It's Boss Up Houston, where we look up, stay up, and boss up.
15% credit on car and motorcycle policies?
Okay.
That's 15% on top of what Geico could already save you. So what are you waiting for? DJ Khaled to be your motivational coach?
Yo, Devin, remember to brush in a circle motion.
Thank you, DJ Khaled.
Tiny circles, Devin. Do another one. Another one.
Is this good?
Put in that work, Devin. Don't give up.
Geico. Save an extra 15% when you switch by October 7th.
Don't play yourself. Hit subscribe to play more great Geico videos. And don't forget to share.
All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Steve Okoraha. We're here on Lawyer Up with Steve-O, and we're going to get right into it. So, as you know, with the pandemic and how it's affected us all, it's been very trying on us, but a lot of times we don't think about what has been happening to our children. Not that they're an afterthought. I mean, we love our kids, but we're suffering, and then we're also trying to rebound and make sure that we're doing everything we need to provide for our children, provide for our loved ones. So my main question as we speak about children in this pandemic is, why has it been particularly harmful for children?
One of the things that we've seen a lot, as you stated, I'm an early intervention, so I do a lot of evaluations. So this is when children come into my office and we begin, what we've been noticing a lot is that these children haven't been exposed to any personal social atmosphere. That means they've been at home, so they haven't even gone to the park. They haven't gone to the grocery stores with parents, because parents are now having people deliver their groceries, or the simple things of going to a birthday party. So all of these acquisitions, which we call personal social skills. And why is it so important? Because you need to build on these personal social skills, because when you get older, we want you to be a team player. We want you to be able to work in a team, but if you've never been exposed to it, then that becomes, so we need personal social for what? Sharing. Turn taking. Engaging in conversation. And more importantly, what do we see? If a child doesn't want to speak and we put them in that social environment, when other kids are speaking, what are they going to do? Try to imitate. So now we've completely removed all that to where we have kids that are displaying atypical behavior. What do I mean by atypical behavior? Now we have some of these kids that have no social experience, that now they seem atypical, that we have parents automatically jumping to the other end and saying, my child has autism. Because they are not socializing, they're not engaging, they're only one. And then, let's be honest, we are parents that are working in a new era that screen time has become the new babysitter.
It is,
And the American Pediatrics Association states any child under the age of 2 should have no screen time. 0.
Wow.
And it says after the age of 2, you should not exceed 2 hours. But now let's see the reality. If you're working from home, what's going to be your best friend?
That's the babysitter.
That's the babysitter. It's free.
Yep.
And they stay in place. But because of that, now we're seeing not only is it that personal social, but now we have 2 forms of communication. We have receptive, what they understand, and then expressive, what they're able to say. So now they're understanding a lot, but they're not able to express themselves. Because the stimulation on a tablet versus the stimulation of a parent is too different. So 99% of the time I get, my child just doesn't want to listen to me. They choose when they want to talk to me. And my first question is like, how much screen time do they get? And I always have to say, well, this is very amusing. There's like lights and there's different pixels and they're very excited. And now you want them to listen to, Giselle, come. So those atypical, which as we'll see, are going to, it's going to be a domino effect. A child that can develop a personal social skill, Steve, is going to struggle to communicate. If they struggle to communicate, they're going to struggle to express themselves. If they can't express themselves, what's going to be their only option at that moment? Fight, yell, scream, throw a tantrum.
Acting out.
Acting out. And then this child has just been labeled.
And it's funny you say that, because I always try to think of the long-term effects of what happens when these types of new situations get introduced to people. So could you kind of go into those, long-term effects of, okay, how does this actually hurt kids as they're growing up and maybe becoming young adults, young teenagers or even preteens,
Okay, so what we have seen is that, early childhood intervention, why it's really important is because of that, all these synapses that are happening and so on and forth. But what it affects is that a child that struggles immediately, so we have 5 domains.
Yep.
So we have an adaptive domain, and this is how is a child getting their needs met. Are they tugging at dad?
Yeah.
Are they pointing? And then we have personal social. Do they feel safe enough to interact with me as well as with parents?
Yeah,
sometimes they feel safe with the item and not even the parents.
Wow.
Then we have communication. What do they understand versus what do they say? And then the question that most parents don't like to hear is like, well, do they understand you, mom and dad, because you're pointing? Mm-hmm. Or do they actually understand if you were not to point? Because if it's gesturing, then they don't understand receptively.
Yeah.
They understand,
Wow.
or the big killer is a child doesn't understand the concept of no.
Yeah.
They understand the concept of your tone. No.
Yeah.
Oh, they like bounce and then they do it again. And you're like, what did I just say?
Yeah.
Because that concept is not there. And then lastly, we have some problem solving skills. So imagine if this is not expressed, we now have a child that is in high school having to do the STAR.
Yeah.
And cannot problem solve. Mm-hmm. Cognitive. And what do we need for this cognitive? The ability to sit down, receptively understand,
yeah.
expressively write it, and cognitively put it together.
Wow.
So when we can do that, we are setting up our children for failure.
Yep.
And although we want to have these programs when they're being pushed when they're in high school, by the time a child is 3 years old, Steve, 92% of the brain development is intact.
Wow.
92. And by the time they're 5, 96% of the brain development is intact. So when I ask you, should we intervene when they're young or should we intervene when they're in high school, what do you think?
Definitely young.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And you touched on schools a little bit. Since the pandemic has happened, of course, people have had to do a lot of in-home, at-home type of learning. But in general, how does early childhood development involve? How is it impacted by teachers and now having to have that through the screen instead of being in person?
So for a teacher, children, so we have 2 types of students. Mm-hmm. We have the student that's a visual learner.
Yep.
And we have the student that could read, just could comprehend and read it and understand it.
Yep.
So now we are having our teachers wear all these hats because we need our teachers to be animated.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. I mean, with all the stuff that's being landing on them,
yep.
Do they have the time to add this extra, thing? Now, I have to also say positive and negative. I think one of the positive of having to do these asynchronous learning and having to learn on your own, because the reality is that when you get to college, you're gonna have to do asynchronous learning.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to learn on your own.
Yep.
But to not allow that proper connection, when a child is from 0 years old to like when they're in 2nd and 3rd grade, they're learning to read.
Yep.
But once they've hit 3rd grade and moving on, they're reading to learn. But if they skipped the learning to read, how will they ever read to learn?
True. That's very true. I didn't even think about that. And I do see a lot of these like TikToks and Instagram of innovative ways teachers are keeping kids involved and trying to, get them enthused, still have that enthusiasm to learn. So it's good to see, teachers out there having to, maybe not necessarily having to do that, but being able to add that element because it is important for our kids. And I have a very soft spot for teachers myself. I love teachers. But, you know, for those that are able, I think it's great. But for those that can't and maybe have a different teaching style, I mean, it's a hurdle, you know.
It's definitely a hurdle. I mean, I think we're all definitely on this roller coaster ride of having to learn and adapt. You know, I went from, you know, my children, because one of them has an autoimmune disorder,
Yep.
she is virtual. And a lot of that, I mean, as much as what the school does, the reality is that a lot of it is on me when I get home from work and be like, hey, let me look at you, what you did. And the reality is that even with a degree, I'll be like,
it's tough,
so what was this math again?
Go through that with me again, and
I'll
tell me
literally
how
be
you
like
got
in
there.
YouTube, like how do you? But then that's even to another object, because what if you're in a rural environment and don't have access to internet?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, there's all these hurdles that were being placed on our children. A simple hurdle like we have as an early interventionist, and I do go to my clients' home, a lot of these parents are teaching their children, and I've seen parents that have their cell phone, and that's what the student is, their son or kid is using to learn. Like, so now imagine the eye, you know, they're like having to enlarge. So there's multiple hurdles that we need to pass.
No, definitely. The pandemic has created nothing but hurdles that we've had to now adapt to and change to, and I'm sure most of you guys out there have felt it. I mean, my kids aren't old enough to go to school yet. I'm actually actively trying to put them in school, so that has been challenging in and of itself. But
and that's a good thing that you're trying to put them in school. But I'm always going to say there's two methods: the Montessori method and the non-Montessori method. And for all my parents, I want to throw this in: if you know your child already struggles to engage in a personal social environment and to begin those communications, don't choose the Montessori route. Because remember, on the Montessori route, the student takes the lead, which I love. But if your student is already struggling to come out and engage and initiate and communicate and turn taking, well, we want to break that cycle. So sometimes it's great you choose the Montessori method, but maybe you might have to find the Montessori that's more structured versus student-led, but teacher-based led. So there's different, because I always have to explain, because a lot of my parents will be like, well, I'm teaching and I want to send my child to a Montessori school. I'm like, your child the entire time that we've been here has just been playing with this ball. I don't want him to do that at the daycare. I want him to like roll the ball to somebody else and roll it back. So I would say, do that research. And I'm going to say, look it up. Every daycare, every child care center in the state of Texas is graded. Look them up.
Okay. Good. I'm going to have to remember that. You guys remember that as well, because I didn't know the difference between the Montessori method and the non-Montessori method, but that's good to know. Yeah. So going into a different topic, but what you said something previously before today's show. You talked about the prison pipeline and how this involves children, which I would have never thought it involved children. But I don't think I've ever heard exactly how kids are involved. Could you explain that a little bit?
Okay, so we know about, you know, one of the largest privatizations in the state of Texas is prisons and healthcare.
Absolutely.
So we have this tunnel pipeline to prison. So everybody's always talking about it. You've heard about it. Like, we want to stop the tunnel pipeline to prison.
Exactly.
And everybody's always talking about it in high school or in middle school. We want to decrease the dropout rate. We want to decrease the amount of joining gangs. I mean, we hear that. I mean, and I'm sure we all heard it, you know, while we were growing up. But now I need you to like get rid of that mentality, because now I'm gonna like wow you.
All right.
Okay.
I'm gonna completely clear my mind.
Now let's go back to early intervention, which we said between the ages of 0 to 3. And I stated before, by the time a child is 3 years old, 92% of the brain development is intact. By the time they're 5 years old, 96% of the brain development intact. 5 years old, what's happening? Children are entering kindergarten. So now let's think about it. No intervention. So the child is entering kinder, 5 years old, and has a speech impediment because they were on a pacifier after the age of 9 months. Moms and dads, after 9 months, no pacifier. Or they were on a bottle After 12 months, moms and dad, after 12 months, no bottle. We have 32 muscles in our mouth. We need to develop them. You keep that pacifier, you keep the bottle, it's not happening.
Wow.
So now you have the speech impediment that the child is struggling to communicate. So when they're in kinder, they're a little bit more patient, the teachers, because you know that the size of classroom size is a little bit smaller. And although there might be some temper tantrums, they tend to move them to first grade. So now we're in first grade.
Yep.
Now you still have a child that can't communicate. What will a typical 6-year-old, Steve, do if they can't get your teacher's attention? What would they do?
Act out.
Act out.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? They're going to bite.
Yep.
They're going to hit. They're going to bang.
Poke, pinch,
Anything.
throw.
Why? Because they are not the ability to express themselves,
Yeah.
to problem solve, to adapt. Again, all the domains I mentioned earlier are coming into play right now.
Yeah.
You know, those domains that we talked about earlier. So now this child can't do that. What happens at the public school system? What tends to happen when a child acts out?
They get in trouble. They get labeled.
They get labeled. So now they get placed.
Yep.
You know, they do this alternative placement, or they take them out of the room,
Yep.
or they place them in another environment. I am here to tell you that for every child in first and second grade that gets placed out is how our private prisons are created.
Wow.
So prisons created are based on how many children are placed in this alternative placement in first and second grade. And let me even give you a bigger shocker.
Wow.
We spend $20,000 per inmate a year.
A year.
We spend $8,000 per student in our public education system.
Wow.
So, I mean, when we say elections matter,
They do.
elections matter.
They do.
You know, so now we have this alternative placement that just took place, and all because early intervention was not provided.
Didn't happen. Yeah.
Now, one of the biggest things that I have to always tell parents is like ECI, early childhood intervention, is a federally program, federal and state. And what does that mean? Moms, dad, teachers, nurses, daycares, well, you do not need a physician to refer.
Wow.
So as a parent, you could say, you know, I've had other kids, but this one is not speaking.
Yeah.
Or just refuses to get rid of the pacifier.
Yeah.
Or a picky eater, or anything. You could refer yourself. And guess what? Evaluations are free.
Good.
And we don't care about whether or not you have Medicaid, or if you have insurance, if you're documented, if you're undocumented.
Yeah.
None of those questions are asked, because at
Good.
the end of the day, we want to make sure every child has the opportunity. And this is why this program was created,
Yeah.
for this purpose. You know, and we have to use it, because whatever you don't lose. I mean, every year we want to see our kids, and we want to make sure we're evaluating them. And just because and one of the biggest fears that parents have is that I don't want to have my child labeled.
Yeah, and,
That's-
and
you know.
I was going to say that, because I know some of you parents are like, well, I don't think my child needs that, and my child is the smartest in the world, and I don't want to seem like I have to have the government come in and, you know, help me out, because my child is not special. They're special, but they're not special. You know, so I know there's going to be that stigma.
Yes,
you know.
and I always say, you know, we take HIPAA very seriously.
Yeah.
We disclose only what you provide us to disclose. Why do we want every parent to do early intervention?
Yeah.
Because one, if a child still continues to need services, when they're in our program, we do what's called transition, Steve. And what this means is that we transition this family to the school district
Oh, good.
to
Okay.
be evaluated and see if they still continue to need service. And guess what, you guys? Y'all are already paying for it with your taxes.
Yeah.
So it's free. Let me say it again.
Wow.
It's free.
Free 99.
Free 99. But why do we want to do it through ECI? Because they're, by law, the school district has to evaluate the child before their 3rd birthday. By law. Now, let's say you're like, I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the child is 3 years old. They have 30 school days to schedule the evaluation. 30 school days to do the evaluation, 30 school days to score the evaluation, 30 school days to schedule the art, 30 school days to implement. That could be an entire year.
Wow.
30 school days is not the weekend. 30 school days is not spring break. 30 school days is not Christmas break. It is 30 school days. So I've had so many parents that they've waited until their child turns 3 and their kid has not received anything until they were 4. What did I say? Between 3 to 5, that's jumped 92 to 96%.
Wow. And I do I wanted to get into that a little bit with the brain synapses and everything. We have a graphic actually to show you guys of the development of the brain. Really cool stuff. Can you kind of go into, kind of the development of the brain for a child?
So we have the brain development of the baby, and they have neurons. So neurons are connected by axons, and consider these dendrites like whiteboards. They're like little synapses.
Yep.
But if you're able to see in the image, it goes from a newborn to 6 months. And if you're able to see the synapses, and then it goes to like newborn, 2 months, 6 months, but I want you to look at the synapses when they're at 2 years old.
Yeah.
Like, look at the amazing synapses. It's like a bunch of spider webs. We need all these synapses to continue.
Yeah.
That's why I know parents hate when I say, please don't tell your child no. And the only reason we say don't do it is because we don't want to stop a synapse. So great example, let's say you ask your son, what color is this? And they say, black. And you go, no, it's not synapse. I need that parent to say, great, this is black. This is blue.
Okay.
You see, I didn't say no.
No.
We don't want to stop that synapse. And one of the other things that we do also, and we don't think about it, is when sometimes the child is speaking, and we tell them slow down. Like, I didn't understand you. Slow down. And I have to say, no, don't say slow down. Why? We don't want them to get unmotivated.
To speak.
So what they say is, like, if they say, like, I'm just a milk, like they say, you're like, oh, you want milk. Let's go get your milk. I bring it down.
And then will they then say no? I didn't say milk. I said
so
mommy,
they slow it.
Okay.
And like Q-tips, I always say, like, for my moms that have a 2-year-old and don't really know if there's like a speech issue. I always say when the baby is 27 months, parents, a greeter at Walmart should understand them. Somebody that's not in the family.
Yeah.
So if the baby says blah, blah, cookie, and you're like, oh, they want a cookie, and the other people kind of give you the look like, okay, cookie, but nobody understood. That's kind of one of those things, like. And we have atypical behavior, and I say atypical because right now I feel autism is kind of like what ADD and ADHD was like 10 years ago. It's like the new, and don't get me wrong, it's very real. There's a spectrum.
Yep.
But, don't always fall into that category. Like, my kid has, it's because my child lines up toys. Okay, if your child lines up toys, what happens if you kick them? Does the child throw a tantrum? Or does the child go, yay, I'm going to build a tower and knock him down myself? Okay, then that's typical. There's that eye contact. So one of the things about eye contact that we always say, is the child looking at you but looking at your eyes, or looking at you and looking at your chin? Or looking at you but looking at your shoulder?
Okay.
So, or, sometimes you kind of like, I'll have parents, well, no, they look at me, but I do this.
Yeah.
Well, you actually caused the movement.
Okay.
You did the movement. So there's like all these little things that, and even for our babies, like our newborns, because everybody's like, the baby's a newborn.
Yeah.
Synapses are going, tummy time.
Okay.
Why? We need a child. Why do we want tummy time? We need tummy time because we need them to strengthen their neck. To control their core muscles and their neck. Why do we need them to control their muscles and their neck? Because they're going to start feeding at 6 months. Yeah. If they can't control their neck, they can't swallow, and you can lay them down because they could aspirate. SIDS.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is that silent, Because if they can't control their neck, you can't feed them.
Yep.
So that, and guess what? If they can't control their neck, they can't chew. If they can't chew, they can't bite. If they can't bite, they can't speak. If they can't speak, they won't write. If they won't write, they won't read. If they won't read, they won't comprehend.
Yeah.
You see that entire domino from tummy time.
Wow. That is a very clear path and bridge to development if I've ever heard one. So those are all very important points. Mm-hmm. And just lastly, before we go to a quick commercial, what else can we do to make sure that the brain development of our children and our toddlers are progressing at the right rate?
So the CDC has actually developmental milestones sheet. So I love it because it's in English, Spanish, Arabic, Vietnamese. It's in all the languages. Okay. And you could actually, not only does it tell you what your baby should be doing, but it also tells you what you could do as a parent to help your baby meet those developmental milestones. Because sometimes it'll be like, well, your baby should be sitting. And you'll be like, like, do I just sit the baby? Well, no, the baby needs to learn to transition. They have to transition to sitting. But there's also questionnaires that are called ages, stages, and questionnaires. And let me tell you why I like that one in particular. Also free, online.
Wow.
Because it allows you to adjust. What do I mean by adjust? Prematurity. So what if a child was born at 30 weeks? And the child is 8. Well, the child is 8 months, but the child was in the womb, got out of the womb 10 weeks early. Yeah. So I need to adjust for that. So although they're 8 months, my child should really be doing things at 6 months.
Yeah.
But here's that domino. A lot of parents will be like, well, they're preemie. But guess what? At 18 months, we stop adjusting.
Yeah.
So we know most preemies will go, and then they plateau. This is where we want to intervene.
Okay, right when
that plateau hits.
Gotcha.
You know, and that's where, and guess what? They're gonna cry.
Yeah.
Especially if a child that, has refused to crawl because mom or dad carries them. Or one of my biggest things when my babies don't want to speak, I'm like, do they have a brother? Do they have a sister?
Yeah.
Yesterday I evaluated the most adorable little girl. She was 6 months old, beautiful. And the minute she cried, like mom lifted her, and I was like, she has 2 brothers. I go, do you have 2 kids? Mm-hmm. She's like, I was like, are they boys? Is she your only girl? And she's like, how did you know? Because she just whimpered and.
Just immediately.
Yeah. I always say children are the biggest con artists. They will choose the pathway of least resistance.
Every time.
So if your child just has to go, and you're like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Why would they ever say milk, food, on? Yeah. Or if all they do is cry, why would they say up?
Yeah.
They choose the pathway of least resistance.
Yeah.
So, and also when you want your babies to learn new things, I always say, bring the items next to your face. And so you could exaggerate the mouth. Because if you're like, you want the ball, they're looking at the phone. They stop looking at you.
They're not looking at you.
So you're like, ball, and the ball's over
and
here.
They're not like, can you?
So you
like,
kind of have to bring it and be like, ball.
Yeah.
And I always say, you want them to do an attempt. Even if it's a buh or good job. You said ball. Let's give you the ball.
Yeah.
You're going to play with the ball. How does the ball feel? And you continue to mention the ball like 20 times in the same thing. Because the child needs to hear it like 200 times.
Okay.
So
they know what it's called.
Exactly.
And they can say it when they want
exactly. But you have 2 kids, right? What are their age?
3 and 2.
3 and 2. Love it.
Yeah.
So a little tidbit. So they fight.
Yep. They sure do.
They fight. One of the things I always tell my parents, I go, what do you do when they fight? They're like, well, I carry him and say, no, you can't hit your sister, or no, we don't fight. Guess what? The worst you should do. You just carried the abuser and did nothing to the victim.
Huh.
You praise the victim. So guess what? Children want mommy or daddy's attention. Yeah. So if I hit you and mom carries me,
Yeah.
I'm going to continue to hit you because I'm like, every time I hit brother or sister, mom carries me. She screams, but she takes me away to another room, and I have alone time. I just got my one-on-one time with mom and dad. So we always say you need to lift the victim and be like, we don't hit, and you pivot. What do I mean by pivot is like you're literally turning, and the baby's gonna be crying, and they're gonna want, and you don't engage. You don't engage.
The one that hit.
The one you don't engage at all.
her.
The minute they're quiet for 1 second, 2 seconds, you're like, what can I do, Johnny? They cry again, you pivot again. Because what we're implementing right now, you will get mommy's undivided attention, but it won't be at the expense of hitting a sibling.
Yeah.
It won't be at the expense of biting or temper tantrum. You know, we have positive and the negative. I call it the ABCs. There's an antecedent, there's a behavior, there's a consequence.
Yep.
Children, antecedent was like, I want alone time.
Yeah.
What was the behavior? I bit. The consequence, he got carried. Was that really a consequence?
Nope.
No. So, just an extra tip.
That is actually so many different scenarios of my kids when they fight. They do exactly that. You know, a lot of different things happen from that. I mean, crying, and of course the other one.
And then the other one's gonna do it when the other one, because you'll be like, you know what? Like it used to be this one that hit, and now this one is doing it.
This one is
well,
doing
guess
it.
what? This one is doing it because this one's like, well, heck, the only way I'm gonna get them is by doing this.
Yeah. It's so funny that development of learning what to do,
because that's how they learn, through experience, through visual. You know, they're like, every time I'm quiet, like I get nothing but but let me carry this one. Like it's that's they true. Got nothing, and that's you know we don't do it because we're bad parents. We do it because we just don't know. I always say when it comes to brain development, your first reaction is probably going to be the last reaction, the wrong reaction.
Yeah.
You know, just because we don't know better. We
have to think twice. And
we have to think, you know, even when they go to the grocery store and they throw an outfit like tantrum.
Yeah.
And I've had one child, and I'm going to say like my daughter, she would hold her breath. Mm-hmm. The brain is magnificent. They're not going to allow them. Like, the brain is not going to. My child will hold her breath to where she's trying to. And I'd be like, oh, purple's my favorite color. Could you do it a little bit longer?
A little bit longer.
And she would just scream. But it's just, or they will throw themselves on the floor, Steve, but right before their head's going to bang, they, like, slow down.
They slow down,
So it doesn't really hit their head. That's why I say children are our biggest con artists.
They are. My youngest one definitely falls into that category, so it's so funny. But hopefully you guys are getting a lot of great information. My head is full of things that I need to make sure that I go home and I implement. I hope you other young parents are taking notes. Let's go to a very quick commercial break. We can pay some bills, and we will be right back.
Stay up.
right, guys, welcome back to the wealth of knowledge that we have been getting on early childhood intervention. We're going to get back into a lot more knowledge, and I hope you guys are learning a lot. This is Lawyer Up with Steve-O. We are back, and now we're going to talk about a lot of your work that you do. We want to outline that. So for those that don't know, could you explain what, in general, or even a little specific, what early childhood intervention is and what your involvement has been in it?
Okay, so early childhood intervention, when it's very close to home.
Yep.
When my daughter was 12 months old, they're currently 8, but when my daughter was 12 months old, I realized she wasn't sitting like most babies. Not doing those things. So I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't quite pin it, And at the time I had my private practice, and they told me, I went to doctors and they told me, she's never gonna, just accept she's not gonna walk, accept she's not gonna do these things. And a crazy thing I decided to do, Steve, was to sell my practice. Wow. I sold my medical practice, sold my house, moved into an efficiency, built a gym for my daughter. Wow. And I was giving her intervention every day, every single day. Wow. In the middle of the night, I would wake up and we'd work the muscles and we work this. And I started doing my research on what is there in the States, because I had just moved from Mexico. Yeah. So the laws, transitioning from one country to another country is different.
Very different.
And I came across early childhood intervention. Wow. And then I found out that it was federally funded. So this is available for all children, regardless. Mm-hmm. And there's a 1-800 number. I actually called the 1-800 number. Yeah. And Lord and behold, like within 3 weeks, somebody was at my home evaluating my child. I didn't even have to go anywhere. So let me tell you about ECI. Yep. We go to you.
That's great.
So we don't even want it to be about you can't get there, or transportation, or, and then we also even fluctuate to where we make it work. We have different hours. So we have a team that's dedicated just to virtual, because maybe the parents are still a little bit afraid, Mm-hmm. But we also have a team that will do face-to-face. And I found out about early childhood intervention. And then when I called, I was like, well, my doctors aren't really telling me anything. I was like, so what do I have to do next? They're like, we'll take care of it. I was like, wait, I'm sorry.
Wow. You're like, wait.
Wait. Give me a minute. I was like, let me process this. Because what do we know about healthcare? You go, you get the referral, you wait until they call you, you make your appointment. Let's be honest, it's like a bunch of hurdles that we have to process.
Constant hurdles.
So here's this program that not only did they do the evaluation, literally at the end of the evaluation, 90 minutes later, they printed right there on the spot.
Wow.
The results, and explained every area of domain. And they said, because their evaluation is comprehensive. Yeah. So what does comprehensive mean? That means that they're evaluating your child with 100. They're comparing your child with 100 other kids. Yeah. And then they're trying to see where the baby's at the bell curve. Gotcha. More to the left, more to the right. Yeah. But all the time, they send you to get an exam, and then you have to wait for results. Yeah. That's stressful for any parent.
It is.
Especially when it comes to your own. It's one thing when it's to you, but when it comes to your baby, you want to know. Yeah, you want to know, what's wrong with my baby? Is there anything, Mm-hmm. So the advantage of ECI, which if you're in Fort Bend County, I'm going to say ECI for Fort Bend County, the area code number is 281-238-1800 in Fort Bend County.
Okay, good.
They, because I guess the evaluation is for free.
Good.
So you lose nothing.
Yeah.
So they did the evaluation. Not only did I get my results on the spot, they explained every area where my child had failed or mastered. Mm-hmm. And I was like, so what do I do next? They said, absolutely nothing. We will send this to your doctor. And I said, well, what if my doctor decides they don't want to sign it? or they forget and they're like, that's the doctor's fault. That's not the baby's fault.
Gotcha.
We will still continue to implement services.
Okay.
And then at the time, I was like, well, I just sold my practice. So funds were
Tight.
an issue.
Yeah.
Well, because it's a federal funded program, it works on a sliding scale.
Oh, good.
So my sliding scale was like $28 per month, not per session.
Okay.
So I was getting speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, nutrition,
Wow.
early intervention for $28 a month.
Wow.
Because since it's a federal funded program,
Yeah.
they are able to do a sliding scale. But it's also state funded, which is the issue because we know what the state legislature I always say
Yep.
it's so hard not to make it political. It's so hard.
It is
but
hard.
for some, it's always because what they did in 2013, the state legislature, which is what they're in 2011, 2013, which is what they're doing now. It was this redistricting and census.
Yep.
And implementing new things. So because they were short in the budget in 2013, when after they redistrict and they implemented everything, in 2013, they saw that there was a shortfall. What they did, usually when there's a shortfall in our state legislature, they do it at the expense of infants and toddlers and the expense of geriatrics.
Wow.
So the loophole that they did, it used to be that any child with a 15% delay
Yeah.
would be eligible. 15%, Steve, is about a 2 to 3 months.
3 months. Okay. Gotcha.
Well, to make up for funds in the state, they increased that 15% to 25%. So that means your child has to be worse. So imagine when a child comes in to get evaluated and they are 23 months,
Yeah.
about to be 2, and the child is only delayed at 23%. I have to tell them come back in 90 days.
Wow.
So I have to literally tell them get worse.
Get worse
Before
and then
they
come
could
back.
get service. So that's one of the things that is the most frustrating. And although when that happened, we had Medicaid waiver programs to implement for that whole, but then Texas didn't expand Medicaid.
Yes.
So when they didn't do the
Wow.
expansion, all the waiver programs that were created for children, because once ECI went from that 15 to 25%,
Yeah.
these Medicaid waiver programs covered that 15 to 24%, so a child was still getting service.
Yeah.
But when the Medicaid waiver programs, when the state didn't expand, guess what? Those Medicaid waiver programs got removed. So now we're back to that 25%.
Yeah, and that's interesting to learn how laws and politics become involved, because I mean they are also concerned with children. One side may seem to be more concerned. One side may be.
And everybody's in favor of public education,
Of
but
course,
everybody thinks of public education as kinder through 12.
Yeah.
They don't realize that ECI and PPC, we're actually under that umbrella.
Yeah.
And now imagine the opposite spectrum. Let's say you have a child that has Down syndrome or CP or is autistic. They actually entitled to get education services until 21 because they don't get adult services until then. So we don't want them to chop off these ends.
Yeah, and it makes sense, and that's why it's important to be involved in your local politics and make sure that you're looking at these things, because if your child needs it, you want to be able to provide it to them, and you want someone that is going to be proactive in making sure that it's as open to the most people.
To everybody and not, like, I think there's a lot of amazing agencies that are being opened in Fort Bend County, which I think they're doing great work, but they're being opened in areas which are of a higher socioeconomic status.
Yeah.
So they might not have the means
to get
there. If a child, let's say you do have a child that is diagnosed with autism, we know that these children benefit from ABA, which is a type of therapy. But guess what? If they have Medicaid, which Medicaid is supposed to cover ABA, in theory.
In theory.
We haven't found somebody to cover it.
Gotcha.
So that's an entire, we need to make sure we're implementing strategies that are not just for a delay, but a delay with a diagnosis as well.
Wow. Okay. No, that's definitely good to know. I wanted to get briefly into something that I personally wanted to hear a little bit about before we hit our next commercial, was the safety of our kids in the COVID-19 pandemic. I know a lot of parents are keeping their kids inside because A, it's dangerous out there. B, there's no vaccine for kids yet. So are children really safe during this pandemic, and how does COVID-19 impact that whole, bringing your kids out?
I think children are bouncing off what we're bouncing off.
Yeah.
I will say, great example as a parent, because my children, since I'm in the healthcare field, my children, I have to tell them when I get home, like, hey, I need you to go to your room, because still I have to, remove where I'm at and wash and everything. And I think, although our children might know, but they see us taking these extra steps, that we maybe weren't taking before, and they are stressors. We have seen children show more anxiety-like features. To where what we're seeing a lot is those children that were born during COVID, like that were born in March, April, May, because these parents were really not able to go out, and they're now bringing them to get evaluated. Mom can't even turn around. The outbursts, the cry is, and this is where I'm having to tell parents, okay, we're gonna start this technique. I need your child to stay here, but I need you to go to the kitchen, and I need you to talk to your baby, because I tell them, it's cute now, but you have to take a shower. You have to cook. There's all these other things that you have to do as a parent. And if you can't make those things work, what's going to happen? The anxiety levels is out there. I think children are going to be as safe as they can be. But I tell my parents, take your children out. Take them to a park when it's not that busy. Or walk around and talk to them. Let them breathe the air outside, the backyard. We don't want our children to be so entertained with electronics that even when they're in an environment of group of friends, they're all in an electronic machine.
Exactly. And we know that the vaccine will probably be available for kids.
There is right now, there's a study right now for 8 to 12. They're doing, so they're doing different studies. I just know because Texas children, they always put it, in their newsletters and stuff. But when, and will it be like the flu? Will it be, I'm not an immunoallergen. I'm not about, I'm not a biomolecular physicist, but that's a question. What we do know is that will it be for us that have been vaccinated? How will it be 6 months later? I think that's, a lot of us in the healthcare, we were fully vaccinated in January. I've been fully vaccinated since January. I myself actually want to see if I have antibodies in July and August just to see.
It makes sense, and anything that can help your loved ones to be protected against it, I say do it.
Yes, we have to, because take those steps.
Absolutely. So, all right, guys, we're going to take one more commercial break. We're going to come back, and then we're going to give you a couple more tips, and then we're going to round up. So we'll see you soon. off of everything that I heard today, I definitely think we can lawyer you up today. Tune into the Lawyer Up with Steve podcast on the Boss Up Houston Network. Come get your questions answered. We'll see you then. And remember, Lawyer Up. All right, guys, welcome back to Lawyer Up with Steve O. I'm here with Dr. Jennifer Cantu, learning a whole lot of advice that I know that I'm going to be more well prepared when I go back into my homes. I hope a lot of you younger parents, fellow parents with adorable kids of your own, you're well equipped to make sure that our kids are growing up and progressing the way they should. And you know of all the resources now that you're able to utilize in order to make sure that happens. So I wanted to discuss briefly two things, as we round up here, because I mean my head is so full with knowledge and I could use a whole bunch of more knowledge, but we're only here for a brief period of time.
Brief period.
So you said ways of keeping kids active. Should we be taking them to like the museum, the zoo, or should we just limit it? Because of course we have to make sure that we're social distancing. Kids sometimes when they go out, they don't always wear masks. They should be wearing masks, but a lot of times we're the ones wearing masks and the kids are just kind of So what are some activities that you also recommend for parents to be able to make sure their kids are being active?
I say, when it comes to, I think that's a decision that as a family, it has to be made together. Questions you need to ask: does one of my child fall into that category of at risk?
Yeah.
Because maybe they have an autoimmune disorder, or they are in remission. I mean, there's all these questions that you have to ask.
Yeah.
And the reality is that might not be the best environment for you.
Yeah.
Because although we know we're supposed to socially distance, but like when you're at a zoo and you go and look at the moths and you go look at the butterflies, one kid's going to be over there, another kid's over there, and you know what they're going to do? They're going to touch the screen.
Touch the screen, yep.
I
was just thinking about that.
What are they going to do? They're going to touch. And then they're going to get on the carousel. Yep. And they're going to touch. So there's all these things. One of the things that I would say is that, Peckham Park in Katy has walks, has amazing trails. The park in Missouri City has the zip lines that are already open that you could do that. Oh, wow. They also have, because there's been a lot of wind, kites. Yeah. Use your kites. Wow. George Memorial Park in Rosenberg, Richmond, the Oyster Creek Park, they actually do the classes that they used to do inside for ecological, they're now doing them outside. Good. So that parents could be a little bit more comfortable. Yep. And what's even great is that they've even taken that step of, instead of having one class where it was 20, now they do split them in two and it's like 10 and 10. Okay. So I think we should do a lot of activities as much as you can, but again, talk to your pediatrician. Yeah. Because if your pediatrician says no because of this, this, and this, and then there's allergy season. Allergy season has just kicked up, and unfortunately, what happens to these kids is that their eyes get so watery and they start crying. And right now, if it looks like they might be sick, they're going to be sent to the nurse, and then the nurse, not because she doesn't, but she's going to be forced to put a sick note, and you're going to have an option of either you keep your kid home for 14 days or you do the COVID testing. How many parents want to have a swab up their baby's nose? Nope. So those are, it's all of these steps that you kind of have to prepare for. Gotcha. Me personally, I do the park, but I get there at 8 in the morning. And I do the skate park in Missouri City. Oh, good, yeah. I'm there at 8 in the morning, and all the Pee-wee games, whether it be soccer or football or basketball, start at noon. So I usually leave by 11:30,
Right.
and we've literally had the park to ourselves. Like my kids have run. I mean, I think pick that time. I've also taken my daughters fishing, and I usually pick the slots from 7 to 10 p.m. We're the
Gotcha.
only ones, and we can
Good.
get a lot of fish. So I think just adjusting
Yeah.
to what makes, I've rented those inflatables, bouncies.
Yeah.
You know what? I actually just bit the bullet and purchased one for
Bought one,
$100, and I have that. My daughters jump in it, and
Yeah.
I literally have put a timer on it because my kids were getting lazy.
Yeah.
And
of
I'm
course.
sure a lot of parents are like, their kids are so lazy. I've put the timer, and I'm literally, until it beeps, you can't stop jumping and running. Like, you're
okay.
not allowed to come in.
Wow.
Like, I've literally, I've become our parents. Our parents
Yep.
were like, you can't be inside. Go
Nope.
outside.
Stay outside. Yeah.
So I've done that because my kids were like, well, I want to be on YouTube, or I just want to watch Netflix,
Yep.
And I was like, no. I was like, one, we're Hispanic. We're prone to diabetes, hypertension, cholesterol. I go, no, ma'am. I'm going to need y'all to be physical.
To be active, yeah.
But that requires me being physical as well, which, I've taken up on doing at-home yoga with the girls.
Gotcha. Well, that's good.
We've implemented some things, but the reality is that sometimes you don't have the time. So make it part of your routine of cooking together. So they have to
Yeah.
get out of the room.
Good.
Just little things. Ideally, if you could get your kids to work out 5 minutes to 15 minutes, it's positive.
Good. And speaking of, going out, and I mean, we talked about school briefly, previously. Where do you see the future of the classroom going? Are we going to go back to normal? Where we're gonna have a bunch of kids in front? How is COVID going to change that?
I think it's, and you're probably going to get backlash. Like, why did that person say that? I don't foresee us going back to that normal. I
Yeah.
think we're going to make adjustments.
Yep.
And
Definitely.
and I always say, we've transformed up to now, and we're going to continue to transform and adjust. Now, will they make it part of? Because remember, they can't force you to be vaccinated.
Yep.
They can't deny education to you because you're not vaccinated. The question will be what steps will be taken to protect the other children
That's true.
or protect the other families. And if we've learned anything from Mike Morath, who's one of the guys in charge for the Texas Education Agency, is that he's dropped it down all to the school boards. So the reason I say that is because what election is coming up next week? School board trustees.
Yep,
So these school board trustees will be actually the people that will be spearing these conversations of what will that new school year look like.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, if those doors have not been available to you,
Yep.
and that you have not been able to have a seat at the table, now, if you had, one of the things for school boards, Steve, is that these decisions are made by less than 300 votes.
Yeah, it's true. Very
And
true.
guess what? They are for over 20,000, 100,000 students.
Yeah,
Okay?
You're right about that.
And
they're different districts.
And they're different districts.
There's Fort Bend ISD. There's Lamar Consolidated. There's
Katy, there's Damon, there's
HISD.
Needville.
It's so
There's
many.
actually seven high schools, 7 districts in Fort Bend ISD. So if you have not liked what's happened so far,
Get out and vote.
get out and vote. I mean, we have amazing trustees, but we also have amazing candidates. I think this has been the year that we've had so many amazing people step up that listen to them. And this is the
Evaluate, yeah.
best they're going to behave right now.
It's true. That is so true. It's funny you say that, because I mean that's exactly what I was going to kind of segue into. Moral of the story is be more involved and really go out there and vet your candidates and make sure you go and vote, because this is elections that aren't typically highly participated in. So
And do your research of
do your
every
research,
candidate.
right,
I
definitely.
think sometimes And I say it because I'm a voter, and sometimes I'll be like, oh, well, I remember I voted, like, oh, I know this name, or and sometimes we don't even do our research. It's like, I think this person,
Yeah, yeah. It's very true. Do your research, but yeah, I mean that was a great way to round up. I mean, I think the more we all are involved, the better that our kids are going to be. So. Hope you guys learned a lot, because I did. Make sure you get out there, get the necessary early childhood intervention that you need, and most importantly, vote in your upcoming board trustee elections. This is Steve Okoraha. We're here on Lawyer Up with Steve. I'm going to give you my contact information briefly before we got to cut out here. Email contact@goodmanmcgill.com. My website is www.goodmanmcgill.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. My phone number is 833-529-9748. Now you have no excuse on how to reach me. You can tell me how you liked the show, what you didn't like about the show. If you have further questions for Dr. Cantu, I will definitely take them and field them directly to her. So let me know what you think. And remember, when life gets you down, remember to lawyer up. All right, we'll see you soon. Thank you, guys. Tune into the Lawyer Up with Steve podcast on the Boston Network. Come get your questions answered. We'll see you then. And remember, lawyer up.